is Street Pulse, and I'm Nora Legarda.
And I'm Bud, and tonight we focus on the subject regional autonomy.
The word autonomy, which has been very familiar in the past several years because the issue of self-government and the determination of our people to obtain it has been very good copy for the media.
Well, very recently, President Aquino, very early in her administration, started efforts to reach out to our countrymen who have long felt neglected by government.
And of course, historic now is a recent meeting with Nur Misuari, and before that, the talks of Boots Aquino with the people of the Cordillera.
Well, tonight we're going to zoom in on the question, is regional autonomy the answer to the Cordilleras and Muslim Mindanao problem?
And I'm sure we'll be able to keep up the pattern of Street Pulse in maintaining substantial and lively discussions. But before that, we'd like to bring you a brief backgrounder on regional autonomy.
The Muslims of Mindanao and the Igorots of the Cordilleras occupy the extreme ends of the archipelago, but they share the same centuries-old struggle for self-determination. In the past, both peoples proved strongly resistant to Spanish and American domination. In time, because of superior foreign arms and alien machinations, the Spaniards and the Americans succeeded in driving a wedge between the colonized natives and those considered to be in the minority. But in the first 2 decades of the 20th century, Mindanao became a haven for American agricultural concerns, and the Cordilleras were invaded by big mining companies, logging concessions, and hydroelectric and infrastructure projects that eventually displaced the natives. In both Mindanao and the Northern Highlands, the natives had to fight to preserve ancient customs and traditions and capitalist encroachment. The 50s and the 60s saw Christians migrating to Mindanao, encouraged by the national government in order to decongest Central Luzon, then the seat of agrarian unrest. In the process, the Christians displaced Muslims from their lands. Grievances against Christian settlers and an increasing Islamic consciousness influenced by Asian and Middle Eastern missionaries gave birth to the movement for Moro secession. War between the government and the Muslims flared up in 1972 and escalated in the mid-70s. The armed forces of the Philippines had to commit much of its manpower and resources in countering the Moro National Liberation Front. Marcos attempted to solve the Mindanao problem by providing funds for Muslim development projects. He tried to convince the world, especially Libya, which supported the MNLF, that the Philippine government did care for the Muslims. The result was the Tripoli Agreement and a short-lived ceasefire that was subsequently violated. A token autonomy established by the regime in the south was rejected by the MNLF on the grounds that Marcos failed to implement the Tripoli Agreement to its satisfaction. Since 1977, the MNLF has been rent into factions. This division was used by the regime to cover up its inability to deal with the Mindanao problem. Up north, the Kalingas and the Bontocs, who had opposed the construction of the Chico dams since 1937, set the pattern for resistance against the Cellophil Resources concession, known to have been backed up by transnationals and the Marcos government. The Igorots gradually came into their own, and their once isolationist stance metamorphosed into a pan-Cordillera movement for self-determination. In spite of oppression and harassment, they stood their ground. With the organization of the Cordillera People's Alliance for the Defense of the Ancestral Domain and for Self-Determination in 1984, began a campaign to establish the Cordillera as an autonomous region. President Corazon Aquino's ascent into power has brought renewed hope in the hearts of the Muslims and the Igorots. Within 6 months of her presidency, she had established contact with the leaders of the Muslim and Igorot movements for independence, either directly or through trusted emissaries. Her appointed Constitutional Commission passed, upon second reading on August 21st, the article on local government, which included the creation of autonomous regions. While the article gives the President General supervision over the autonomous regions, the natives themselves are to exercise powers over their ancestral lands, policies, and natural resources. Will such powers not breed abuse or chaos later on? What possible consequences will the present administration have to contend with once autonomous regions operate? Have other means to fulfill the natives' dreams been explored? Is autonomy the only solution to the Cordillera and Muslim Mindanao problem?
We're back here at Street Pulse on the very hot issue of regional autonomy, and which is so hot to introduce our panelists for the evening.
Well, tonight we have with us to share their views on this important subject, a set of very distinguished guests, no? Headed by Minister Kandu Muarip from the Office of Muslim Affairs and Cultural Communities, or OMAC.
Cultural communities and minorities. Communities.
He's formerly an assemblyman representing the province of Basilan. Right. We also have with us to my right Commissioner Dugong Uka, who is from the, of course, Constitutional Commission, and then last but not the least, we have Datu Michael Mastura, who is presently the president of Amanabang, but he's also the project director of the Philippine Sharia Institute and president of the Southeast Asia Sharia Law Association. So that's the lineup for tonight, folks.
Maganda ito kasi pinagsama natin ang North and South in one show, no? Parang epic, no? Anyway, yes, we can start out with Commissioner Reagan here, si Pons, no? Could you explain to us the mechanics of the provision on autonomous regions, given the Cordillera and Mindanao autonomy? Ano bang ibig sabihin talagang autonomy as opposed to federalism, secession, and all these other terms that we come in contact with in the past several days?
Yung aprobahan sa Constitutional Commission ay napakailalim sa tinatawag na local government. Pero binigyan natin ng pansin ang autonomous region kasi bago ang provision na ito. No? Ang sinasabi ng autonomous regions, mas marami ang mga kapangyarihan na pupunta sa autonomous region kaysa doon sa local autonomy lamang. Limawa, yung political authority sa autonomous regions mas malakas kaysa sa local government lang. Ibig sabihin, magkakaroon din ang mga autonomous regions ng regional assembly, regional executive, and including a judicial system, lalong-lalo na sa ugnay ng personal family at saka practice.
Pons, bakit yung Cordillera at yung Muslim Mindanao were singled out in this particular provision under the
doon
local
sa pagpaliwanag natin, kasi itong dalawang region na ito, ang merong matatawag natin na cultural continuity mula pa doon sa panahon bago dumating ang mga Kastila. Tapos yung kasaysayan nila na natili sa isang medyo homogeneous na ecological area. Kaya sinasabi natin na sa patuloy na kanilang pagdepensa sa kanilang kasarinlan bilang isang grupo ng tao, nagkaroon ng paghihiwalay mula doon sa nakararami na lowland Christian.
Commissioner Uka, what provinces or areas are covered by, let's say, the autonomous region of the Cordillera and the Muslim Mindanao? Have the CONCOM decided on that?
Well, for Mindanao, maybe I'll be able to name them, but for the Cordilleras, I think I leave that to our good friend, the handsome Pons Benagen.
Mag-umpisa po tayo sa Mindanao.
In Mindanao, well, we have Region 12, you know, the province, Region 12 and Region 9. Well, Region 9 will cover the provinces of Sulu, Tawi-Tawi, Basilan, Zamboanga del Sur, and maybe part of Zamboanga del Norte, because there are also cultural Muslims and cultural communities in those areas. Now, in the province of Lanao, and then we have this region 12, Lanao, del Sur, and part of Lanao del Norte, of course. And then we have the Cotabato provinces, which originally was Cotabato, used to be the biggest province in the Philippines, maybe a little bigger than the Kingdom of Belgium in those days. We now have 4 provinces there. We have Maguindanao, Sultan Kudarat, and we have this North Cotabato, and I don't know Dato, is South Cotabato included there? I don't think
Cotabato is
so.
not
Yeah.
included. South Cotabato.
Yeah.
That is if we are to abide by the regionalization, the regions that are existing right now. Tayo ba ay mag-a-abide sa regions 9 and 12, and paano ang division nito, ang inclusion?
Yeah, maybe Ponce.
Doon sa provision na naaprubahan, hindi tinitiyak kung ano talaga yung mga areas, yung mga territories na masasakupan nito. Ang mangyayari dyan, magkakaroon ng plebiscito. At yung mga tao mismo ang magpapasya kung alin sa mga teritoryo ngayon ang isasanid dito sa autonomous.
So kung anong sumagot na no, hindi sasala sa autonomous region.
Pero sa probinsya at saka sa lungsod, kailangan ganong kalaki yung unit
By province.
and by city.
Okay.
Halimbawa, kung isang buong city ay ayaw, hindi sila sasali dito sa autonomous
Sa
region. O kaya buong probinsya. Ganun din sa
Ganun din sa Cordillera. Anong
It's
sakop
a general
ninyo?
provision for both Cordillera and Muslim Mindanao.
Dato Masura, what is your view about the recently approved constitutional provision on the regional autonomy?
Well, initially I was very much involved in the hearing, but in the course of the deliberation and as the committee reported, naturally it was left to the commissioners to work this out. I think there are certain problematic issues regarding the way that the CONCOM has worked it out. And precisely, I think that's the very reason why Mr. Nur Miswari said that he would not like to be bound by whatever the CONCOM.
What particular problems have this, Dato?
For example, I think we can raise the question of the process itself. I think we can mari nating tingnan ito sa pamamagitan ng ano kaya mangyayari kung ito'y matuloy. Ang mangyari ay unang-una, we will have to depend on Congress to pass an organic act. Therefore, the structure, as it were, would tend to depend on how the Congress will react with. So parang napopospone yung consideration, no?
Which our representative from the government, Minister Muarip, of course, would like to know, sir, would you think that this provision on regional autonomy, would this solve the problem both in the Cordillera and in Mindanao? Is it really the solution to the present problem?
I believe so, though as was stated by Dr. Masura, there is seems to be a problem if this provision in the Constitution be approved, because of the fact that what the people of Mindanao understood before under the concept of this Tripoli Agreement, that there was this so-called plebiscite already that has been carried and accepted by the people, the fact that the two autonomous government now are existing. So they have decided already what province does it belong to Region 9, and the provinces also that belong to Region 12. And if this should be changed, probably some of the area, like for instance the city of Zamboanga, who passed recently a resolution that they exclude Zamboanga city from the autonomous government of Region 9, there seems to be a problem, the fact that the seat of the autonomous government of Region 9 is in Zamboanga City. So I foresee the problem.
I'd like to go back to the idea of autonomous government. I'd like to hear from Dr. Parpan here. This is the same concept that you're also trying to promote in the Cordillera since you're working there.
Well, I think gusto ko lang muna balikan, no, yung nabanggit kanina, yung punto na yung basehan ng regional autonomy proposal ay yung tinatawag na cultural continuity sa dalawang magkabilang dulo ng North at saka South. Dapat sana na isa lang alang na mayroong a little bit na an argued assumption, that first of all, what has happened has been a homogeneous status quo kind of socio-cultural and historical reality because of the fact that in a sense, both ends, the North and the South, were in a sense the unconquered races. The truth of the matter is that there has been, in a sense, a very genuine pluralism that has grown through these years of struggle. Although we would say that both truly hold a culture of resistance, still the different cultural communities within the North and the South cannot just be truly lost, say, as we say, the Igorot, and in the South, the Moros. Although in the South, I guess we can say that the term Moro has a more substantive content historically and culturally. But the term Igorot is in a way very empty, culturally and historically. So I would just like to make that kind of clarification.
Mariflor, after we take a break, you'll explain to us your stand as opposed to the stand of the other factions in the Cordillera.
I will do that, yes.
After this. We're back here in Street Talk, and we're currently tackling the issue of regional autonomy. And Pons here, maybe we could tackle the issue deeper by explaining to us kung paano nag-iiba talaga ang regional autonomy sa secession at saka sa federalism. At saka ano ba talaga ang stand niyo as opposed to the stand of some factions sa Cordillera?
Yung stand dito sa commission, no?
Yes.
I do not represent any interest in the Cordillera nor in Muslim Mindanao, no? Basically, sinasabi natin na yung autonomous region is strictly still within the territorial integrity of the Republic. Hindi yan hihiwalay sa kabuuan ng Republika. Pero yung control ng central authority, which is Manila-based, mas mababawasan. Supervisory na lamang. Kaya nga sinabi natin kanina na magkakaroon ng legislative assembly, executive department, and even a judicial system doon sa autonomous region na wala doon sa simpleng local government lamang. Sa local government, direct yan mula sa central authority hanggang doon sa barangay. Yung authority ng presidente halimbawa o ng legislative at saka ng judiciary. But not in the autonomous region. No? But still, importante na ito ay napapaloob doon sa territorial integrity ng Republika. Sa secession, kakalas na yan. Kaya nga sabi, dismemberment, no? Secede. So, wala nang, kahit ng supervisory powers ng central authority, wala na.
Hindi ba step ito towards secession?
Hindi naman, depende yan. Kasi
Eventually.
may historical basis naman kasi yung panghingi mo ng autonomy o secession. Kung sa pagkakaroon ng autonomiya ay matutugunan yung social, political, and economic problems, and then the cultural integrity of the group, walang dahilan na yung mga tao hihiwalay pa, kakalas dito sa national framework.
Mike, in this concept of regional autonomy explained by Pons, no? In what areas will the autonomous regions have complete, say, control, and in what areas will the national government pwedeng makialam?
Bagamat sinabi natin kanina na yung control nawala na, yung overall supervision sa presidente pa rin. Tapos sa national planning, merong systematic consultation. Binigyan natin ng pansin dito yung systematic consultation ng autonomous regions at saka ng central authority. Tapos yun sa area ng foreign affairs, ng banking and finance, even the school system, meron pa din, no? Pati sa taxation. Although of course in the area of taxation, mas malakas ngayon yung control ng autonomous region sa taxation at saka sa paggamit ng kanilang natural resources. Kasi ito yung batayan ng kanilang economic development and eventually of course the social, political and cultural.
I'd like to be more specific about the questions we will ask Commissioner Ugahim. Pag yung ibawa between a conflict between yung customary law saka yung national law, let's say with reference to the exploitation and development of natural resources, if there's a conflict which prevails, will the customary law prevail or will the national law prevail?
The national law, of course, because as long as the autonomy is under the integrity and sovereignty of the Philippine government, then naturally they have to follow the national law. The customary law comes in when it is not inconsistent with the national law. That's why they have that autonomy. And in the words of the draft, it says here that there must, of course, be the President of the Philippines, naturally, shall exercise general supervision over autonomous regions to ensure that they are faithfully executed.
Butch, I'd like to ask Datu Mastura here. Isn't this move towards regional autonomy dangerous in the sense that it is a precedent setting, like other regions after the two regions, Cordilleras and the Mindanao, would be given autonomy, baka sumunod na rin dyan ang Bicol region o ang Ilocandia. Tapos wala lang matitira sa Metro Manila kundi ang Southern Tagalog or Metro Manila.
I think the word dangerous is very dangerous. you know, there is a misconception here that when you grant autonomy, the next thing you have is secession. I think that's a very
But I guess
negative...
it is a common notion of people, that's why we have to clarify.
So we have to correct that notion. That well, first, I think I'd like to return the discussion to a framework which will provide a common touch for all the structures that we are working on. The idea of a state is to subdivide the different organs of government. And you either do that by a federal type, in which case there will be component states, or you have a unitary system, as in our case, in which case you have a monolithic monopoly of power in the central government. Now, what has been decided by the Constitutional Commission is to grant autonomy to two areas. Now, this does not mean that we are closing the autonomous setup for the other units. However, the way the draft is made now is that it is only a special autonomous unit with respect to the Cordilleras and the Muslim area.
What happens to the non-Muslims, for example, in Mindanao or the non-Igorots in the Cordillera?
Sagutin ko na lang sandali. No? Doon sa constitutional provision, klaro na nakalagay doon na yung mga ibang areas hindi pwedeng magkaroon ng autonomy status na walang constitutional amendment. Kasi sinarhan. Kasi nangyari nga dyan na nung nadesisyonan na unitary sa halip na federal, yung structure ng government, nagkaroon na ng consensus na dapat ilagay natin sa constitution na itong dalawa lang. Tapos kung pagkatapos nito, merong mga ilang regions na sa tingin nila kakayanin nilang mas magsasarili, that has to be through a constitutional amendment. Hindi yung basta ibibigay na lamang.
But sang-ayon ba tayong lahat dito sa grupo na ang regional autonomy ay ang makakalutas ng mga problema sa Cordillera at saka sa Mindanao. Si Marie Floriata ay ibang
Una-una muna siguro, yun nga, bumalik ako doon, dun sa pagsasabi ng tungkol sa cultural continuity o kumbaga yung parang pagkakapare-pareho ng karanasan sa makatuwid, nagkaroon ng halos magkaparehong hubog ang bawat dulo ng ating republika, ang North at South. Ang dapat na malinawan na unang-una, ang kasaysayan ng Pilipinas, sa totoo lang, talagang bago tayo sinabakan ng conquistadores, ay federated states tayo, federated nations. In other words, we were communities who were interacting with one another, politically, commercially, culturally, as equals. And then, pumasok ang mga tagalabas, mga banyaga, linupig tayo. At ang epekto ng paglulupig nila sa atin, yung pagsentralismo. Pagsentralismo ng resources para tayo mapasipay at ma-dominate. Ngayon, ang punto ng regionalization, saka ng regional autonomy, is in a sense a kind of contemporary rectification, isang pagtutuwid ng katiwalian na naganap noong panahon. Kaya ang isang pinupunto dito, yung decentralization for greater participation, for more access, for more equality. Self-rule, through self-governance by each of the communities that are concerned. Pero kung ang mangyayari na ang tinatawag na regional autonomy ay magbubunga, instead sa decentralization, magbubunga sa isang mahigpit na centralismo,
Hindi rin yun ang...
Hindi yun, isang parang perversion yun, At yun ang isang katanungan ko na parang I was going to leave it for a little bit later.
Yeah, Mariflor, before you go further, siguro, want to react to that.
Maganda't na ilabas ni Marie Florian kasi doon sa commission mismo, lumabas din yun sa diskusyon. Halimbawa, sinabi natin na sa kaso ng Mindanao, hindi naman yan homogeneous na masasabi talaga, kasi may mga iba't ibang ethnic groups dyan, At nabanggit nga yung mga pinakamalaking ethnic groups dyan, yung mga Tausug, Maguindanao, at yung mga Maranao, at saka iba pa. At sinabi rin natin na sa Cordillera, hindi rin relatively homogeneous yan. Kaya lang sinabi natin na kung ihambing natin itong dalawang grupong ito doon sa lowland Christian communities, mas may pagkakahawig sila sa isa't isa. Kaysa kung ihambing mo doon sa isang taga Maynila o kahit na taga Bulacan o kaya Bicol. Ngayon, yung sinasabi na baka magkaroon lang to ng panibagong centralist or statist authority, klinaro din namin yan. As a matter of fact, sabi nga ni General De Castro at tandang-tanda ko yung sinabi niya doon sa consultation na kayo, sabi niya doon sa isang consultation, kapag nabigyan na kayo ng autonomy, do not be the next oppressor. At paulit-ulit namin sinabi yan na with this autonomy, there should be no way for warlordism, halimbawa, to emerge or for other dominant groups to oppress in their own way yung mga mapapaloob
Hindi ba
dito sa
idealistic
autonomous
yung,
region. Hindi naman, kasi yung sabi nga natin, may mga sariling dynamics na yung mga regions na kagaya rin natin, meron na rin sariling expression ng people's power. Ibig sabihin, there is a continuing democratization of social life.
I'd like to go back to the earlier problem raised by Mike here, Yung minister, itong problema ng plebiscite, hindi ba mangyayari dito, will it not happen that, if some regions vote for the autonomous government and some not, posible ba mangyari yung sa gitna ng kalakihang autonomous region, meron hindi papayag na covered by or sakop ng national government? How will the government handle this?
We cannot really evade that because all men think not equally. What is good you think now to the other is not good. There is a possibility. That's why if you ask me on the plebiscite, there should be no more plebiscites in Region 9, for instance, because everything has been set up already. And the moment this will be brought about, I anticipate that we may have a problem.
Paano mo rin yung mga, let's say, pabor nga sa regional autonomy, pero may mga tao naman doon na hindi pabor doon,
Well, we
will
have
they
to-
have to get away from their settlement?
No, not necessary. We have to accept the fact that in this country, the rule of majority should be followed. Otherwise, each community will have their own government.
Pero hindi, don't we see conflict brewing there? Pagbigyan natin autonomy ang mga regions na ito, and magkaka-conflict naman within the regions.
No, I don't think so, because the only thing here that the people should be informed of what is this autonomy, of what is this term. Like for instance, in Region 9 and Region 12, we have commonly accepted the so-called Bangsamoro. Now this is only a name, and it doesn't mean that when you are under this autonomous and be called Bangsamoro, that the Muslim is only the Bangsamoro. It is addressed to people who stay in this region, for instance. So for the people to know and understand the term, because they are Filipino, of course, but they are within the territorial area of the autonomous government. Certainly, they must have an identity. And the Bangsamoro, I'm only talking of the Bangsamoro, for instance. Now, the Bangsamoro is being used to the people, to address the people coming from the autonomous government. So to us in the region, I don't think so there is...
Mike, would you want to
much
react to that?
Yeah, I'd like to raise a question, actually, not reacting to Minister Juarez, but I'm addressing this. You see, we have an impending negotiation between the government of the Philippines panel and the representative of the Bangsamoro or MNLF, which would amount to something like this. Now, the fact that the CONCOM has already decided on the autonomy question, it is not preempting the result of that exercise.
Well, we shall discuss the details of that after we take a break, and we shall be answering your questions which you phone in through 993733 and 9776669 after this. We're back here in Speed Pulse on the very complex and hot issue of regional autonomy, and we just received some questions from the viewers from Jun Bengzon to Datu Mastura. Why is it that the Aquino government gives importance to the Miswari faction when in fact there are other factions among the Muslims? Is he the authorized representative? Let's speak for the majority, really.
Well, here, Lauren, this brings us to who actually is recognized as the legitimate representative. Now, there are many ways of answering that, and we keep stressing the divide and rule factional measure. The better measure is who is actually recognized in the concept of the Organization of Islamic Conference. Now, which is of course, if we are speaking of the initiation of hostilities and later on the cessation of hostilities in 1976, that is the Tripoli Agreement, then Mr. Nur Miswari is the sole signatory in representation of the MNLF. And that must be the reason why Mrs. Aquino and her representative, the brother-in-law,
Decided to talk to him.
Yes. There's a related question here addressed to the minister. Kung pwede lang paki-explain briefly what is the Tripoli Agreement all about na pinag-usapan natin kanina pa. This is from Jose Fajardo.
Well, itong Tripoli Agreement pinag-usapan, ito isang kasunduan na nilagdaan ng pamahalaan ni President Marcos, represented by the late Barbero, and of course from the MNLF group.
What are its
represented
basic
by
points?
Miswari.
What are the basic points raised in this
Well,
particular
the
agreement?
basic point is that this Tripoli Agreement has been implemented in the two regions.
It grants autonomy to what region?
Regions 9 and 12.
May I intervene here? No?
Kay White.
You know, kung titingnan mo yung AAA agreement, ito'y isa lamang framework,
Mhm.
isang base na pagdidiskusyonan.
Mhm.
And may mga issue yan.
Mhm.
Apat ang areas of concern. Number one is the establishment of autonomy.
Mhm.
Number two is the area, the definition of the area covered by the autonomous government. And number three, the details of the structure, which were mentioned. Halimbawa, yung educational system, meron silang amount of autonomy, yung economic and finance system, the judicial system in terms of, let's say, Islamic law, Sharia, and customary law, or adab. And then, finally, of course, the effectivity. Now, during the time of President Marcos, some of these were implemented unilaterally. There were accusations or counter-accusations of violation of the provisions of the truth. Dahil sa hindi natapos yung pag-uusap. Kaya ngayon, isa pang sub-question, parang hindi natin nalulutas yung, o naliliwanagan yung issue na yan. Ano ba kaya ang stand ngayon ng MNLF? Babalikan pa kaya yung AAA agreement? Kung hindi naman babalikan, tila magkakaroon ng panibagong agreement.
I'd like to ask the Commissioner Uka here, in the implementation of this regional autonomy for Mindanao, will they be using the yung AAA agreement as the framework, yung bang susundan, or are they going to adopt a
If I may come in. Now, actually, this negotiation between the President and Nur Mishwari, because I have the opportunity, in addition to what Dato' Mastura has been saying, I have the opportunity to meet the Secretary General of the Organization of Islamic Conference, and they recognize the leadership of only one, that's Nur Mishwari. That's why it's Nur Mishwari that the government has been contacting and trying to negotiate. And with this, the OIC, I think, is banking on what was agreed before. So that's why when I read this provision, there seems to be preempting of this present negotiation between Nur Mishwari and the Philippine government.
Would you have another?
Yes,
Another question here. No? How would the autonomy, maybe this can be answered by Dato' Mastura, affect the Christians in the area? Would it not result in apartheid, in something like apartheid?
Well, it's something like
That's
this.
from Bob Artado pala.
It was already explained earlier that there are historical, legal, and economic as well as social basis for the autonomous setup. For example, one should read what is the background of saying that the Bangsamoro has a territorial claim. You see, I think one of the things that we do not realize is that for example, the Sultanate, which is the basis of organization of the Sulu Sultanate and the Maguindanao Sultanate, at one point in time entered into treaty relationship with other countries. Now, as a result of which the Sultan exercised suzerain power, not necessarily sovereignty. Now, in this case, there are historical basis for the claim, therefore, of an entity that pre-existed the Philippine Republic. Now, I think that is what Ms. Wari is saying, that the incorporation of the territories dominated by the Moro were imposed by the colonial powers, and there is a continuity now with the Philippine government. So that is a withholding of the right of self-determination. But the answer to your question would be something like this. Those Christians who have decided to come to Mindanao, or those who have decided to go to the Cordillera, must accept the reality, the given, that they are going to face what we call cultural pluralism.
And if they don't, earlier you mentioned about the Christians being forced to resettle from those areas.
No, well, if they cannot accept that, I think they should move out. In the first place, the government sponsored the planting of these Christian colonies and communities, the recto colonization law, the Quezon
That's it.
law.
Wouldn't this really complicate matters more and create more factions within this?
I think most of these questions are very negative. Why don't we ask positive? Will it not create a situation where
That is a
we
basic
will be
question.
able to manage the affairs? You see, the trouble with the analysis by the national leadership and the intellectuals in the national capital region is that they think that the only point of view that is valid are those that are coming from the central point of view.
Pwede bang tumingin dyan, Mike?
Yes, fun.
Kasi doon sa commission mismo, inilabas ko din yung mga ganyang klase ng apprehension based on a Christian bias. Sabi kasi nahirati tayo na majority, tapos nung binigyan natin ng pagkakataon na yung mga grupo magkakaroon ng pagsasarili based on the principle of what I call equality and non-discrimination. Sabihin, pag mapapanood ko dun sa Bangsamoro, dun sa Cordillera, tapos hindi ka nananampalataya dun sa kanilang kultura, ekonomiya, politika, the principle, at least that's what I said, be based on equality and non-discrimination.
Another question here,
I'd like to answer that.
siguro we'll shift to Cordillera naman. We're talking about Muslim Mindanao. No? And this is a question from Bolet addressed to Mariflor Parpan and Commissioner Benagen. Personally, how certain are you that the majority of the people in the Cordilleras who desire autonomy?
I'd like to answer that. I'm personally quite certain that majority of the Kalinga, the Isnag, the Ifugao, even the Kankanauri and the Baloy peoples do not want regional autonomy the way it was propounded by the Cordillera People's Alliance and the Cordillera People's Liberation Army. In fact, I'd like to share with you the shorthand that an Isnag elder said. We do not want to be Igorotized. Igorotismo is comunismo, and we don't want either of those.
Yeah, siguro this is related, before you answer Ponzo, this is from Manuel Vicente, and his question goes like this. How did you arrive at the conclusion that majority of your people want autonomy? Did you have a plebiscite? So it's a related question to that issue.
Yung problema ng autonomy, of course, meron tayong pag-aaral din dyan at ito ay matagal na natin binibigyan ng pansin. At doon sa public hearings na isinagawa sa Baguio at saka sa Bontoc, na kung saan nandun yung mga tao na inorganisa primarily ng FREL and other groups, this came from a cross-section of Mountain Province and surrounding areas. Kita mo naman yung interest. Nung una, natatakot nga sila kasi akala nila yung bang hihiwalay na, no? Yung apprehension nga, dismemberment, tapos paano ngayon yung suporta natin na ibinibigay ng gobyerno, kakayanin ba nila, yung mga gano'n, no? Pero doon sa pagpapaliwanag, batay doon sa mga proposals ni Commissioner Noliedo, yung iba pa na nagbigay ng proposals, ganun pala naman ang ibig sabihin na hindi naman pala ito paghihiwalay. It is not dismemberment, it is not secession.
Magsususog lang ako.
At saka tapos nagpadala sila ng mga pagpapaliwanag galing doon sa area na pinimahan ng mga iba't ibang tao. In any case, we're saying na sa ganyang klase ng pagbabago, there are no guarantees. We must leave it to the dynamics of social life to determine its final shape.
Before we go any further, before Mariflor answers back, let's take a break.
We're back at Pete Pulse, and we'd really like to accommodate and answer all your questions. But before that, meron tayong reaction dito. Ano sabi mo?
Meron lang akong susog,
Okay.
sa
sinabi ni Pon.
Sinabi ni Pon. Ang paghubog ng regional autonomy proposal para sa Cordillera ay medyo snap. Sa makatuwid, walang hearing sa Kalinga, walang hearing sa Ifugao, at saka yung hearing sa Bontoc na puntahan mismo ni Governor Moldero at saka ni Butch Aquino, yung mga tao doon halos unanimous ayaw nila. Kasi ang reason nila, ang main,
Mariflor, that's not true. I was
magiging
there.
worse magiging worse daw ang isolation.
You can read the proceedings
ang
with the commission.
Response, but that was just said
Read
to...
the proceedings.
That's what we mean. There is a conflict brewing right now.
Yes.
Doesn't this issue of regional autonomy really cause
Because the
Hindi naman.
proceedings are really a batch of disinformation, a lot of them, and I can bring one here, but I won't do it. Matter is, there were no hearings in Ifugao, no hearings in Kalinga, and the hearing in Bontoc, in fact, attended by Governor Moldero of Mountain Province, and by Butch Aquino himself, the two of them related to our Kalinga Isla group.
Sumilip
that there
lang
was
yung
very-
dalawa.
There was
Sumilip lang
very
yung dalawa.
Okay, before that,
there was no unanimity at all.
but if no, you have duties. Now we'd like to know, some sectors say, Pons, that the regional autonomy stand of the Cordillera is only being used as a front for furthering communism in the Cordillera. How
Lumabas
true
din yan
is
sa
that?
Baguio, sa public ng commission, sa
So it's not
batasan
true.
mismo lumabas din yan.
Hindi yan.
Sila yung sumagot. Sila yung sumagot, yung mga representatives dyan. At sinabi nila na yung kanilang palakad naman open, no? Yung bang sinasabi nila na ito ay isinasagawa nila ng hayagan, hindi itinatago. So sila mismo yung sumagot.
Okay, I'd like to go to a more simple question addressed to Commissioner Uka. Are autonomous regions empowered to form their own armies once they have been established as autonomous?
No, because the national government will be responsible for the security and defense of the region. The only thing that the autonomous government can do is for the police. It says exactly that they have to have the police work in those areas.
So ano ho mangyayari dun sa MNLF, yung mga CPLA, yung mga NPA armies dun sa regions? Will they be integrated into the regional army or whatever, or the national security forces?
Well, that would be some kind of an arrangement. If they would really agree, ideally that should be.
May isa pang question dito, no, para kay Minister Moarip, no, from Mr. Santiago. Kindly comment on this observation that considering that the majority of the Filipinos are Christians and not Muslims, the autonomy issue is presented to the people in a plebiscite will not be accepted. I guess the plebiscite din naman ito sa concerned areas, no?
Yeah.
Now, would you
General
refer,
plebiscite. Also, how
would you
will
refer
we-
that to Mindanao, for instance?
Yes.
Now, it would be dangerous.
You're using the word dangerous again. He might say that the word
Now, I
dangerous
say
is
dangerous because the group of Nishwari might proceed with their alternative. The alternative is secession, that they cannot get this autonomy. I think it should be known to the Philippine government, to everybody. There is an international implication already in this autonomous government in Region 9 and
So
12.
if we do, you mean if they're not granted autonomy, then they might move for secession?
Well, it is expected because international
So we've got no
forum.
choice then. Is that the pressure on the part of to pressure the government to give in?
Well, it is not exactly a pressure, but this is very dangerous. I always use the term dangerous or the word dangerous because you know the situation in Mindanao is so explosive and it has exploded already.
Not only in Mindanao, also in the Cordillera. We just witnessed a
Mike, you want to add something to that?
Yes,
Because the question is centered on Mindanao. What if it will not be carried in the plebiscite?
Yeah.
That is why I was saying that there is here seems to be a problem.
Mike,
with the provision.
Mike, you want
So
to add
that's
something
why,
to that?
Mr. Minister, we should not use the same parameters in judging the Cordillera
That's right. I agree.
vis-a-vis the Mindanao
I agree.
problem. There are
So which is the more
differences.
explosive area, the Mindanao then?
Oh yes, of course, because
Yes,
it has
definitely.
international
Yes,
Repercussions.
implication. But a bit of clarification though, no? People do not realize in this generation that maybe 4 generations ago, both the Cordillera and the Mindanao part of the Moro were autonomous. The mountain province and the Moro province. Then we were incorporated by the Jones Law of 1916 after the abolition of the Moro province and the mountain province into the national setup. Now, nobody raised the question of plebiscite. We were never asked. If you ask us today and we review, well, we would like to retain our autonomy. We would not like to be bound by national laws that do not have relevance to our lifestyle.
Pons, I'd like to...
You know, that is a very good point that you raised. But I think what was happening then was a regionalization that was very organic and holistic before the Jones Law. But now what's happening is in a sense something else. There are a lot of political undertones, a lot of stratagems and tacticians.
Okay, Butch, we have a lot more questions. Commissioner Bingagan from a citizen here. For tax collection, will the money go to the National Treasury or to the autonomous region? Okay.
Pons, how will you going to face this problem of preemption now that, kasi that will affect the chances of getting it legislated?
Pero tingin ko, pag magkaroon ng mas masinop na pag-unawa doon sa problema, tapos yung mas malawakan na pagpapaliwanag, hindi naman siguro magkakaroon.
Pag mag-grant ang regional autonomy, do the regions have the authority to seek support from foreign governments, from Alena Reyes of San Juan?
Meron pa din, pero hindi independent of the central government.
Mike,
they cannot have treaties with the foreign government.
What will the Muslims, or what do you think should be the thing to do now that this problem of preemption is coming up?
Well, that's the problem of the Kongkong, not mine.
Well, can the issue of autonomy be avoided by just passing appropriate laws for the Cordillera and the Mindanao in Congress? Pwede bang ma-avoid itong issue of regional autonomy or talagang nandyan na sa
Well, theoretically pwede rin. Kaya lang nandyan na sa komisyon.
Okay, with that, we thank you and we're sorry. We'd like you to call us again next week as you join us on Street
Yeah,
Pulse.
if they have Lorenz questions or suggestions or commentaries, maybe they can address it to the Ateneo Center for Social Policy at the Loyola Heights Campus.
Maraming salamat po. We'll see you next Friday as we tackle gender equality.
Women's issues
On
po tayo
Street
next
Pulse.
week,
We'll
mga
see you.
kaibigan.
Good night. Good evening, I'm Lauren Legada and this is Street Pulse. Tonight, we tackle the issue of gender equality, or some people would rather call it women's liberation. Are the women in the Philippines exploited or liberated? Is there really inequality in the treatment of the sexes here, or is it just a product of the mind? My co-host, Bita Bad, would rather watch me now how I'd tackle this issue as a woman of Lee. Well, sayang, because we have very interesting guests for the evening who are raring to speak up. But in the meantime, let's take a look at this historical feature on the role of a Filipina in Philippine society.
When President Corazon C. Aquino left for the United States last Monday, she created a stir with her new hairdo. For the woman president of the Republic, who as a candidate was chided for not putting on makeup and wearing manicure, this was probably a concession to a feminine packaging. Such issues may be trivial, but they are seriously taken by dissenters, not as conditions of appearances, but conditions of her psyche. Her decision and her timing to talk to U.S. President Reagan, for instance, is being criticized not just by a few, and in most arguments about the president's unprecedented ways, like talking directly to Muslim and Cordillera rebels, the conclusion boils down into one statement: babae kasi. Once an overconfident opponent took the same perspective and said that the woman's place is in the bedroom. He further lost dignity and votes. Early this month, a group of female militants announced the formation of a woman's party and declared, among other things, the oppression of women must be put to a stop. The oppression of women in the pre-colonial Philippines was never an issue. Men looked to women as equals, sharing equal rights in owning properties and exercising civil and political functions. Women were allowed to farm or to trade, while men helped with the housework and looked after the children. The predominance of priestesses like the Babaylans in the Visayas indicated the early Filipinas' not only equal, but revered position in the society. The coming of the Spanish colonizers changed all that. The role of priestesses, for one, was virtually stamped out by the aggressive Christianization campaign. The Filipina became an ornament who pledged beauty, modesty, and chastity in the feudal patriarchy, while the Castilian-oriented male boasted his virility and power at home and in the society. Women were not allowed to participate in political discussions. Girls, until much later, were not allowed to have formal education. The crag, the Bible, and the school book were prime instruments of American pacification of the islands at the turn of the century. Nonetheless, women's greater access to education and to work opportunities led them to civic works, and then significantly later, in 1935, the right to vote. With their greater participation in the political and social activities, Filipinas began to realize that they have become of a capitalist society that the Americans were extending in this part of the world. Women, they discovered, were considered commodities. Married women began to bore the double burden of home and work, yet the burden did not bother them. For after the war, the women began organizing themselves as backup or auxiliary groups for mainstream politics, which was established and dominated by men. As the nationalist movement grew in the 70s, there came women's group like the Makibaka. The Makibaka was the first feminist group with an ideological framework. It declared that women's emancipation could only be attained after the liberation of the country from foreign and feudal domination. When the world groaned under the economic crisis, conditions in the country turned for the worse. Banks closed, factories stopped work, the population sought job opportunities abroad. Of the 10 workers who left for overseas, around 3 were women, making the Philippines the biggest exporter of female workers abroad. Teachers became domestic helpers. High school students became entertainers. Young girls became hostesses, prostitutes, or mail-order brides.
And then I'm the one, or I'm only the one who works. Yeah, all my children still studying. Yeah. But this year, that's why I'm going back. I promised to my children that I'm going back because he's going to graduate college. Even I make bad things here in Japan, I overstay, but I'm not worried because my children is very happy. Yeah. But I'm not make durogo. I never make pickpocket.
At home, oppressive forces used sexual assaults against women in the countrysides and in the city. Export processing zones relegated workers to cheaper wages. Pornographic magazines and movies, which further exploit and humiliate women, continued to proliferate. The degradation of women has also been used as a strong argument against the retention of the U.S. bases. Feminist-oriented groups have been organized to carry various issues in all fronts. With it are bigger hopes because of, it is said, the Filipino feminists stand on richer and firmer revolutionary practice. But is not the Filipino woman already emancipated? Are not feminist movements more divisive? What more rights, privileges, and stature does she want? Can national problems be equated in terms of being men and women? Who needs liberation?
Who needs liberation, the men or the women? And all our guests for the evening are raring to speak up. Well, we have Attorney Ferida Ruth Romero, Secretary General of the Constitutional Commission and Professor at the UP College of Law. And Sister Mary Soledad Perpignan, Sister of the Good Shepherd, Coordinator of the Third World Movement Against Exploitation of Women. It's an international organization with consultative status in the United Nations. And Arsuki Doris Nuval, the Head of Public Affairs Program of People's TV Channel 4, and the head of the Planned Women's Party, we'll talk about that later, and Fem Mangahas, head of the Concerned Artists of the Philippines Women's Desk, and of the Women's Solidarity, and the lone male na kasama natin dito, si Kitch Ortego, a journalist and the editor-in-chief of Bull Today. Well, you're all waiting to speak up, but first, let's take a short break. Street Pulse will be right back. So what will happen to the children? Who will give them care and moral guidance?
No,
Assuming that the men are immoral?
I don't get the question. If the women are liberated, we would neglect the children. It doesn't follow.
So it doesn't follow?
No, we will become better mothers, better wives.
Maybe what it's trying to say is that if you'll be totally liberated, more opportunities will be opened. You might neglect your
The point
functions
here
in the
is, I
home.
think, equal responsibility in the rearing of children. It doesn't mean that just because we are liberated that we will neglect our children and go to the streets and do whatever we want. It's sharing of responsibilities and not just relegating any one function to one sex.
That's right. Yeah, like there are in some places they have this practice of half-time work. Both wife and husband would have half-time work so that they would share in the nurturing of the children. And I think we're depriving men of a wonderful experience, you know.
We have yes, Kid.
Depriving men of a wonderful experience.
Of being close to your child, so that you can spend hours at home also to play and to care.
Yes, we do play with young ones, our children and the children of others or young ones.
Well, I'd like to go to Kitch. Baka magalit sa atin si Madaling Marathon. To make me laugh, please. Another question is to Sister Sol. Is the rise of prostitution related to the presence of U.S. servicemen? I think this was answered. This question is from Noel Dolor of Bel Air. What appropriate measures must be undertaken to minimize the effects of prostitution?
Well, there are a lot of things that have to be done from a macro level. There should be a change in policies, you know. The development strategy should change. And then from governmental level, we should not be in collusion with the parties that promote prostitution, like a city government making it legal. We are more promotionist rather than abolitionist in our stand towards prostitution here in the Philippines. And of course, the invisible hands behind prostitution, you know, the big business, they should be called to task. And then the military bases, you know, I was really shocked at the Constitutional Commission when they talked about prostitution, you know. It's as if it's a necessary evil that people will accept. I feel it's very degrading, you know. And we wrote a letter to the Constitutional Commission about this matter, and we really put it on their conscience. If ever this proliferates, it will be partly their fault.
So you're trying to say that this issue is on a national level, actually. Should the government then change its thrust on, let's say, tourism and on the stand on the military basis?
Definitely so. And you know, one of the questions I've been asked repeatedly ever since Cory became a president is this. You know, I was interviewed by a number of international journalists. They said, would it make any difference with her as president? Because she is a woman. And I hope it does make a difference. Of course, right now, she has many problems to tackle, but I hope she'll give time to this very crucial issue.
But I think no matter what the thrust of the government is, it is really up to the women on how to handle it. Whether sex tourism is prevalent or the military bases are there, it is really up to the women on not to succumb to the effects of these...
You see, they are they are just pawns, you know. And there is also such thing as a stroke of a pen if you're in power. For example, in Vietnam, after the liberation of their country, they no longer have prostitution the way they used to have it in 1970 up to 1975. And so if they use revolutionary power really to say that they don't want the tourist area, they don't want the marriage market, they don't want Olongapo and Angeles to be what they are right now, that would have an effect.
Well, another question here from Jeffrey Ramos. To any of the housewives, are you not satisfied with your role as housewives? Definitely not, from all the answers that I gathered from all of you.
Lauren, may I say something about that?
Yes.
In fact, from the findings of the United Nations after this decade, the International Women's Decade, the finding is that this inequality, this inferior status and condition of women can be traced to her playing the role of housewife and mother, which is underpaid and undervalued. Simply because they work the whole day and far into the night and yet they are not paid, this work is not considered productive. And they are not considered in, of course, the people who earn incomes. And this is the main reason why people, even the husbands, tend to look down on the women, because they are not supposed to be productive, they are not earning, and yet they are performing such a vital function in society, being a mother to the children and also being a wife.
And definitely, Doris would not be content with being a housewife, considering that she's setting up this all-female
That's why my
political
marriage
party.
broke up, I think, because I knew from the onset I was never meant to be one.
Fair?
For so long as women are tied to the homes, they'll never be able to develop their full potentials.
And Kitch?
I'd like to make a comment on that United Nations finding, statement. No? If wives were paid for what they are doing as wives, that would be prostitution.
Oh, well, you're looking at it from another angle. What we mean is that especially the work that she's doing at home, raising the children, doing all the housework, she's not paid, and therefore she's looked down upon.
Yes,
In
that's
concrete terms, in
that's what-
dollars, I think, to be specific, she's valued at something like $35,000 a year.
And besides, Kitch, when you say that if she is paid, she'll be like a prostitute, but you're only thinking in terms of sex.
No. What I mean by prostitution is, for example, as a writer, I can prostitute my profession.
Yes.
When I offer myself for a fee. That's prostitution. Now, the
You're talking
wife is
about
not...
envelopmental journalism?
Yeah, that's it. A wife is not supposed to be paid for her auxiliary obligations.
I don't think we should take this literally anyway.
Yes, not to be paid literally, but quantify or place a value or an estimate on the work that she does, because otherwise she is felt to be rather useless.
No, but she already gets compensated for with the fact that she has a roof over her head, she has food, she has clothing, and she's not even a relative of the husband.
You make her sound like a beast, just to have a roof over your head and food to eat and to drink. Why, she's no better
We
than
have
an
another
animal.
question here for Sister Sol from Jean Carmona of Pasay City. Are you in favor of women taking part in military action? I think that's in the military, since your movement seeks for equality in all sense. Siguro parang sa Israel kung kasama sa armed forces
First
or
of
sa
all,
military.
I have a personal stand about the military system, and I'm for peace. And I can't see, I really don't like all this, the war and the violence that accompanies all this, membership in armies and so forth. I can't even stand the CAT system in high school, to see the young girls in fatigue. I'm glad I wasn't.
So when we seek equality, bakit pagdating sa mga...
No, I think I have been very uneasy about this discussion on equality, because that's not really the point, about equal being the same in every aspect. It's being true to what you are, and as I mentioned earlier, there's the masculine and the feminine in each one of us, and to allow this to bloom, in a beautiful blend, I think that makes us very happy human beings.
Thank you. Before we go, we'd like to remind you that there is a multi-sectoral consultation on drug pricing in the Philippines on Thursday, September 25 at 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Bribio Hall, Pollock Center, Ateneo de Manila University campus, and the keynote speaker is Minister Alfredo Bengzon of the Ministry of Health. And maybe you have time to answer one more question. What exactly did you feel when our woman president addressed the joint session of the U.S. Congress last night?
Let me say this, Lauren, we were so proud, and today, the whole day, the CONCOM commissioners, males, were saying we never felt prouder. And they added, I'm sure President Marcos and the former First Lady were so jealous or envious.
That's a question from June Makaspak of Quezon City, and I think that's a very fitting question to ask to cap this edition of Street Pulse. Diyan siguro wala na masasabi si Kitch Ortego, no?
I felt nothing.
Well, with that, we thank our guests for the evening for having joined us. Fe Mangahas, Doris Nuval, Attorney Romero, Kitch Ortego, and Sister Perpignan. Thank you very much. Good night.